You know the feeling, right? A Captcha workflow passes that very first test perfectly, but then completely falls apart the second it hits a real Clerk server action in production. Welcome to today's explainer. If you're an automation developer, you definitely know this pain. Your local test works beautifully, but the Wild West of production is a completely different beast. I mean, during that first test, everything is just smooth sailing. You capture inputs, submit the request, get your token, and boom, you're on your way. But in production, it is a totally different story. The token gets solved, sure, but then it's instantly rejected. You run into session mismatches. Polling loops run forever, and infinite retries, well, they just hide the real problem, creating this absolute nightmare of silent failures. Heck, your logs might even be sitting there happily saying, "Captcha solved," while your actual workflow is secretly crashing in the background. So today, we are turning those flaky integrations into predictable, rock-solid production infrastructure with a 7-point checklist. We'll be looking at the production reality, inputs and errors, polling and context, defining success, budgets and KPIs, and finally, troubleshooting. All right, let's dive into this with part 1, the production reality, or as I like to call it, the false finish line. This right here is the absolute core thesis you've got to remember. Getting a Captcha solved does not mean your workflow actually completed. Getting that token, that is not the finish line. The goal isn't just to solve one challenge in a vacuum. The real goal is to build a Clerk server action workflow that's stable, observable, and most importantly, doesn't wake you up at 2 a.m. with some phantom error.
Moving on to part 2, inputs and errors. This is all about building the foundation.
So step 1 on our checklist, capture exactly what the solver needs and absolutely nothing more. We're talking the site key, page URL, and action value. Please do not collect random page data. Scraping extra garbage just creates these massive, confusing debugging paths. You might end up blaming Clerk or the solver when the real culprit is literally just a stale site key. Then we have step 2. Treat API errors as real failures. If it fails, log it safely, alert your monitoring channel, and just stop. Believe me, a hidden failure is so much harder to fix than a visible one.
Next up is part 3, polling and context. This is where we maintain our state.
Now, a lot of Captcha workflows use a submit and poll flow, but you've got to have strict rules to prevent endless loops. You submit the task at 0 seconds, sure, but don't just immediately hammer the API. Give it a sec. Wait about 15 seconds before the first poll, then poll predictably every 5 seconds. And, this is absolutely crucial, institute a hard cap timeout at 120 seconds per task. You never, ever want to leave a server action hanging out there without a clear timeout. Step 3 is all about using that controlled polling we just talked about. But step 4? Step 4 is vital. You must apply the token in the exact same session context. I seriously cannot stress this enough. This is the single most common cause of post-solve rejection. If the challenge starts in one browser context, HTTP client or cookie jar, and you try to apply the token somewhere else, downstream verification is going to fail for sure. It has to be the exact same challenge, same session, and same continuation path. All right, on to part 4, defining success and tracking the right metrics. I really want to let this quote sink in. The real success metric is not token received. The real success metric is, did the protected workflow complete? You have to track these two things entirely separately. A solved task just isn't the same thing as a successful workflow. If the solver hands you a valid token, but the action still fails, you need to be checking your session state or your downstream verification, not yelling at the solver.
This brings us to part 5, budgets and KPIs, or how we measure all of this at scale.
Step 6 on the checklist is setting a strict retry budget. Endless retries are just going to hide real problems and burn straight through your account balance. You have to cap them. For instance, maybe allow 3 attempts with exponential backoff and then just fail gracefully on any terminal errors. And that leads right into step 7, monitor the right metrics and KPIs so you know exactly how the whole system is actually performing.
To put this into perspective, for a healthy integration, you want your first solve latency sitting comfortably under 25 seconds. Your solver success rate, along with your end-to-end acceptance, should both be hitting 95% or higher. But here's the real kicker. Pay close attention to your cost per accepted solve. If your solve volume is suddenly spiking, but your accepted workflows aren't moving, you've likely got a wrong parameter loop on your hands. Looking at volume alone will completely mislead you.
Finally, we arrive at part 6, troubleshooting and fixing the breaks. So, let me ask you, why does a solved Captcha still fail? Seriously, if the solver gives you a perfectly valid token, why on earth does the workflow crash? Well, the answer is usually because the token was applied in the wrong session. Maybe it expired before it was used, or it was actually created from incorrect inputs right from the start. So, when a workflow suddenly breaks in production, you've got to know where to look. Rapidly check the site key, the page URL, the captcha type, and the action value against the live HTML. Verify that the session context matches completely. And finally, check your downstream acceptance status so you can spot exactly where the drop-off is actually happening.
Okay, here is your practical takeaway for today. Treat CAPTCHA handling in Clerk server actions like actual production infrastructure, not just some quick helper function you slap together. Validate your inputs, preserve that session context, control your polling, cap those retries, log safely, track real workflow success, and always review the setup before shipping. Oh, and it probably goes without saying, but only ever run these workflows in owned or explicitly authorized environments.
I want to leave you with one final question to chew on the next time you're staring at your dashboard. Are your logs happily saying CAPTCHA solved, while your actual workflows are secretly failing behind the scenes? Go check that gap between solved success and downstream acceptance. Thanks for joining me for this explainer. I really hope this helps you build much more resilient integrations.